Rain had been falling all day over Riverrun, a steady gray curtain that blurred banners and turned the outer yard into sucking mud. Inside the great hall it was only marginally drier, but at least the cold was kept at bay by the roaring fires and the press of bodies. Men in boiled leather, ring mail, and damp wool clustered along the walls and around the long trestle tables, voices low, every sound muffled by the drum of rain on slate and stone. Above them, the carved Trout of House Tully watched from the rafters, its painted scales dull in the smoky gloom. At the center of the hall stood the war table, a massive oaken slab laid atop trestles and scarred by generations of knives. Maps lay spread across it, pinned at the corners with daggers and wine goblets. The Riverlands, the Westerlands, the Crownlands, each inked with lines and sigils and tiny carved armies of wood and painted stone. A red lion crouched at Harrenhal, another at King's Landing. A crowned stag marked Dragonstone. Wolves, dozens of them, ran rampant over the north and the southern rivers like a pack ready to fall upon wounded prey. Robb Stark leaned on his fists above the map, auburn curls damp with sweat and rain where they clung to his brow. He had not taken off his mail for hours, and the weight of it dragged at his shoulders. Yet it was not the steel that made him feel older than his years. It was the raven. The bird watched him from its iron perch beside the dais, black eyes like wet beads, feathers slicked and ragged from long flight. The parchment it had carried lay unrolled on the table between the wooden armies, held open by a dagger that had once belonged to his father. The seal was broken now, the black stag of House Baratheon cut cleanly in two. "Read it again," Lord Karstark growled from Robb's left, his long face pinched beneath a scruff of gray beard. "I'll hear the madness in it with my own ears, your grace, and no, I have not misheard." Robb's hand twitched toward the parchment but did not quite touch it. He knew every word already. Catelyn Stark took the letter instead. She stood at his right, wrapped in dark blue wool trimmed with the faintest Tully crimson, hair streaked with gray at the temples beneath a simple net of silver. Her face was drawn, but her voice was steady as she read, projecting just enough to carry through the murmuring hall. "In the name of Stannis of House Baratheon, first of his name, King of the Undulls and the Royner and the First Men, Lord of the Seven Kingdoms and Protector of the Realm," she began, "it is declared that Joffrey, born of Cersei Lannister, is the issue of incest and no true Baratheon, and that the Iron Throne is usurped by a bastard pretender." A ripple of sound ran through the hall at that, grim satisfaction from some, dark laughter from others. Robb said nothing. He watched the River Lords and his own bannermen instead. The Blackfish with his hand resting on the hilt of his sword, Lord Roose Bolton pale and unreadable, the Great John looming like a shaggy mountain near the ale. Catelyn continued, "Let all men who hold themselves true to justice and the memory of Robert Baratheon bend the knee to Stannis, rightful king, and aid in casting down the Lannister power. Those who do so shall be confirmed in their lands and titles. Those who do not will be dealt with as traitors." "And the rest," Karstark said. "The insult." Catelyn's mouth tightened. "The boy who calls himself king in the north," she read, "is no true king, for there can be but one. Let him put aside his false crown and swear fealty as Warden of the North, as his father did before him, and Stannis Baratheon shall show him the king's grace." Silence swelled then, heavy and thick, save for the pop of burning logs and the quiet rasp of gray wind's breath. The great dire wolf lay sprawled at Robb's feet, gray fur ruffled, yellow eyes half-lidded. He sensed the tension in the air and lifted his head, teeth flashing faintly as he yawned. "King's grace," the Great John Umber rumbled, breaking the hush with a snort. "I've had my fill of king's grace from the south. Begging your pardon, your grace. We crowned you our king, and I'll be buggered with a weirwood branch before I bend the knee to some sour-faced stag on a rock." A rumble of agreement moved through the northern lords. Men thumped fists against tables, nodded, muttered. The river lords were quieter, watching Catelyn as much as her son. "Stannis Baratheon has swords," said Roose Bolton, soft and even. "Ships. He has a claim if the things he writes are true. And he has a priestess if stories are to be believed. fire and shadows and gods from across the narrow sea. His pale eyes drifted to the raven. He also has the habit of making demands he cannot yet enforce. That is a dangerous habit in a king. Robb straightened slowly. His hands left impressions in the parchment where they had pressed. His throat felt tight with the need to speak, to shout, to ride out and find Tywin Lannister and end all of it with steel. "We know what he wants," he said. "The question is what we want and what we can win. We raised my banner to avenge my father and free the North. That has not changed." He looked to his mother. Catelyn's eyes met his, blue and tired, full of a grief that never seemed to fade. For a heartbeat he saw nothing but Winterfell's courtyard. His father's smile, Bran laughing on the rooftops, ghosts in the rain. "The realm is breaking," Catelyn said quietly. "Renly is dead. Balon Greyjoy calls himself king on his rocks. Joffrey sits on the throne with his grandfather's army propping him up. Stannis will not yield his claim any more than you will yield yours, Robb. But you share an enemy." "I," muttered the Blackfish. "And if the lions are free to gnaw at our flanks while we posture, we'll all be bones in their bellies." When the hall had emptied at last, the noise of the men fading into the distant echo of the yard, Robb lingered over the map. Servants moved quietly around him, gathering cups, scraping trenchers, banking the fires. The raven had been taken back to the rookery. Only Catelyn remained, her hands folded before her as she studied her son. "You were hard on them," she said softly. "They needed it," Robb answered without looking up. His voice had the rough edge of youth trying to sound older. "Karstark would have me march on Casterly Rock tomorrow, ships or no ships, and drown half the host in the Green Fork for want of a bridge. The Great John would charge the Vale, the Neck, and the Eyrie all at once if I let him. They need to remember who commands here." "They remember," Catelyn said. "They named you king. They followed you when others would have yielded and gone home. They followed you when you rode to war for your father's sake." She paused. "They will follow you into folly as well, if you ask it." His head came up at that, sharp as a wolf scenting danger. "You think this folly? To keep the crown they gave me? I think it is dangerous to cling to a crown if it drags you beneath the waves," she replied. "Robb, listen to me. Stannis has fleets. We do not. Stannis has a claim that will move the lords of the South. Yours is new, unwritten. You are the memory of your father made flesh, but memories fade quickly in King's Landing." Robb's hands curled into fists atop the map. Beneath his knuckles, the inked outline of the Trident darkened where rain from his cloak had dripped. "Renly is dead," he said. "Dead, and we do not know how. Men whisper of shadows and sorcery, and in the whisper they forget that someone swung the sword. Joffrey is a boy with a crown and no honor. Stannis is Stannis. Cold, stern. He would see the North bent under him, mother. He said as much. Put aside his false crown," he writes. "As if the men who shouted my name in this room were children playing at soldiers." "Stannis Baratheon is a hard man," Catelyn said, "but he is not without honor. Your father knew him once. He held Storm's End against all the might of the rebellion, while Robert drank and whored and Ned bled in the South. Stannis did his duty, always, even when it brought him no love. Honor enough to burn his brother?" Robb shot back. "Renly was Robert's son in all but name, and now he is Ash." Catelyn's gaze flickered. "We do not know how Renly died," she said carefully. "We know only that it happened in Stannis' camp in the night, and that men of Renly's host have bent the knee to Stannis afterward. Some whisper of shadows, some of knives. Men will seize on any story that makes sense of loss." There was a weariness in her voice then that had nothing to do with Stannis. It was the same tone she had used when speaking of Bran's fall, of Ned's death, of Littlefinger's treachery and the Lannisters' lies. A voice that knew the world would never be as simple as it had seemed in Winterfell's Godswood. Robb's anger ebbed, leaving something like exhaustion behind. He sank onto the carved chair at the head of the table, his Uncle Edmure's seat, for this was Tully's hall, though it was Robb's war. "What would you have me do?" he asked. Yield the crown? March south as Stannis's good little wolf and kneel before the iron throne I swore to break. Catelyn moved closer. For a moment, in the flicker of the firelight, she saw not the bearded young king but the boy who had clung to her skirts when he was small, solemn, and watchful, always watching. I would have you live, she said. I would have you keep your people alive. The Freys grow impatient. Lord Walder tolerates us because we are strong and near, but he has little love for oaths that do not profit him. The Lannisters bleed the Riverlands day by day. If we try to face Tywin Lannister, the Redwyne fleet, and Stannis Baratheon all at once, we will be ground to dust between their stones. Robb shut his eyes for a heartbeat. When he opened them, they were clearer. An alliance, he murmured. Yes, Catelyn said, on terms that do not make you a child in Stannis's hall. You are king in the north and the Trident by the will of your lords. That cannot be unmade by a line of ink from Dragonstone. But oaths can be woven together. You can be a king who chooses to stand beside another king, for a time, against a common foe. Robb's gaze went to the map again. The painted lion at King's Landing seemed small, suddenly, against the sweep of the Seven Kingdoms. Stannis will never accept two kings, he said. Then we must make him believe he is the only one, Catelyn replied, except in the hearts of men who will never bow to him in truth. Words, Robb, titles. A parchment can say one thing and the world another. Let Stannis have his style and his glory in the south. Let him be the king in song and in the September. You will be king in the snow and the gods' wood and the hearts of your people. The Lannisters cannot stand against you both. They reconvened the council before the hour of the wolf, when the fires had burned low and most of the castle was sunk in sleep. The air had grown colder. Their breaths misted faintly as they gathered again around the map, cloaks drawn tight. Outside, the rain had slackened to a thin drizzle, the patter on the roof like distant footsteps. Robb did not sit this time. He stood at the head of the table, gray wind pressed against his leg, the direwolf's fur brushing the hang of his sword. His crown of bronze and ironwood lay on the table before him, beside the broken seal. My lords, he began, voice carrying in the stillness. You have heard Stannis Baratheon's letter. You know his demands. You know what I swore to you here, in this hall, when you raised me on your shields. The murmurs died to nothing. Karstark's gaze was hard, his jaw clenched, the Greatjon's shaggy head tilted, curiosity gleaming in his eyes. Even Roose Bolton's expression sharpened by a fraction. I meant every word I said that night, Robb continued. The North will be free. The Trident will be free. The Lannisters will pay for what they have done to my father, my house, and these lands. He let the promise hang between them like a drawn blade. But I cannot win 3 wars at once. No man can. Tywin Lannister sits at Harrenhal with half the strength of the West and the Crownlands, and he is no fool. The Iron Throne commands the Redwyne fleet and whatever ships the city can muster. Stannis Baratheon has his own fleets and his own army, and his letters say he means to march on King's Landing soon. The Great John snorted. Let him. We'll sweep down on Casterly Rock while the lions are scrambling to save their cub, and gut the West like a fish. And what of Frey? Brynden Tully asked dryly. When he realizes the lion's gold might buy him more than the wolf's gratitude, Lord Walder keeps his bridges, and his word, as long as it suits him. No longer. Karstark slammed a fist on the table. The wooden lions and wolves jumped, clattering against one another. Then we take the twins, he said. Damn the old weasel. His towers are no match for northern steel. We'll hang him from his own bridge and ride over his corpse. And how will you feed the men who drown trying to cross the Green Fork under his archers' arrows? Roose Bolton asked in a mild voice. Or march them through the neck if the Freys put the bridges to the torch. Harrenhal's fields are rich, but they do not extend that far. There is another way, Robb said. Before the argument could slide further into blood and bluster, he picked up his crown, feeling the weight of it in his hands. Bronze caught the firelight, dull and solid. His father had worn no crown, yet the image of Ned Stark's face rose in his mind all the same, steady as stone. "We ask Stannis Baratheon for ships," he said. "We offer him our swords in his war against the Lannisters, on terms that recognize what we have done here. The North will not bend the knee again as it did after Aegon's conquest. But we can stand beside him as an ally. King in the North and the Trident. King on the Iron Throne. 2 crowns, 1 cause." Karstark stared at him as if he'd suggested they feast on poisoned lion instead of wolf. "You would give up the crown?" "No," Robb said, and the word rang sharp as steel. "I am your king. That does not change, but words can be bent. My father bent his knees to Robert Baratheon and kept the North his own. We are fewer than we were then. The Lannisters are richer. The South is more tangled. We need ships to strike where Tywin cannot hide behind burned castles and broken keeps. Stannis has ships." "And sorcerers," murmured one of the river lords at the rear, crossing himself with a quick touch of fingers. "So do the Lannisters, if half the tales of their alchemists and wildfire are true," Brynden said. "This is not a war we can fight with swords alone." The Great John barked laughter. "Swords are enough for me. But if the boy means to use some southern king as a ram against King's Landing while we keep the North safe, I'll drink to that. When do we start?" Karstark's face remained carved from ice. "My sons died for the king in the North," he said. "For an independent realm, not some half measure. They screamed your name as they bled, your grace. I'll not spit on their ghosts by swearing to a king who calls you boy." Robb met his gaze. "I will not ask you to," he said. "Not in your heart. But I will ask you to look at the map, my lord. At our strength and theirs. If an alliance with Stannis wins us the war that leaves the North and Trident free, will your sons' ghosts curse you? Or bless you for seeing them avenged?" It was Roose Bolton who broke the silence. "It is a risk," he said. "But then, so is every move we have left. If Stannis falls, the Lannisters will turn their full strength on us. If Stannis wins without us, he will treat us as rebels. If he wins with us—" He let the thought trail away, as if the possibilities were too many to name. "Then we must make certain he cannot win without us," Catelyn said. "And that he knows it." Dawn came grudgingly to the Riverlands, a pale smear of light behind banks of cloud. The rain had finally ceased, leaving everything slick and shining, as if Riverrun had been dipped in the Trident. The air tasted of wet stone and charred wood. Catelyn walked the eastern battlements with her uncle as the castle stirred awake. Below them, the waters of the Red Fork and Tumblestone embraced the island fortress, currents tugging and swirling around stone foundations that had stood for centuries. Men moved ant-like in the yard, tending to horses, checking harness, stamping, feeling back into numb feet. "You've planted a hard seed in that hall," Brynden said, his voice gruff beneath his gray mustache. "Some will call it wisdom, others will call it betrayal. They already call it both," Catelyn replied. Her hands were tucked into her sleeves against the chill. "I hear the whispers. The boy king, they say when they think I cannot hear. The Tully woman reaching for southern strings." Brynden snorted. "Let them whisper. They owe you more than that, for pulling them out of the muck my brother's folly dragged them into." Catelyn let her gaze drift across the river to where the smoking ruins of some distant village smudged the horizon. The war never stayed still. One day a farm would stand, with its hedges and low stone walls and children running in the fields. The next, blackened timbers and crows. "Robb is not Ned," she said. "He cannot be. Ned would never have accepted any crown. He followed Robert because it was right then. Robb must navigate a world where there are too many kings and not enough right." Brynden leaned against the crenellation, peering down at the river with a soldier's squint. "Stannis Baratheon," he said. "I knew him a little in the days before your wedding. Hard as iron and twice as flexible. Did his duty, always, which made him half as charming as your husband and twice as useful. If there is any man in the South who will keep a bargain because he swore it once, it is Stannis. There are those who say he killed his own brother with sorcery, Catelyn murmured. Her uncle rolled a shoulder. There are those who say Ned fathered Jon on a fisherman's daughter. Stories are stories. Men will make monsters of anyone who stands in their way. If Stannis has turned to darker gods than most, that troubles me. But not as much as Tywin Lannister with all the might of the Iron Throne behind him. A gust of wind plucked at Catelyn's hood. She drew it closer, though it did little against the ache in her chest that never left. Every new decision felt like a betrayal of something, of Ned, of Winterfell, of some younger version of herself who had believed the rules of the world were simple. Honor, duty, family. She had thought those words a guide once. Now they were a knot she could not untangle. If this alliance goes ill, she said, Robb will bear the blame, not I. They will remember the boy who reached out to a kinslayer and sorcerer and say he lost the North. Then we make certain it does not go ill, Brynden said briskly. You were right to suggest it, Cat. Without ships, we are penned behind these rivers. The Freys will not hold to us forever. Walder Frey's loyalty goes no deeper than his purse. The Lannisters are like a fire. If we do not smother them, they will spread. He rested a hand on her arm, unexpectedly gentle. Do you trust your son? She did not hesitate. With my life, she said. With my soul, if I still have one left to give. Then trust that he will know when to bite, and when to show his teeth and wait, Brynden said. The young wolf, they call him. Let the South learn to fear his howl while Stannis smashes his antlers against the gates of King's Landing. It will make them more amenable to reason when the time comes. Catelyn looked east, toward the lands beyond the neck she could not see. Somewhere out there, Jon rode the cold winds of the Wall. Bran lay broken in Winterfell, or rising and falling on a pallet under Maester Luwin's hands. Arya and Sansa were lost to her, ghosts moving through a world of lions and gold. Reason, she said softly. I remember when that word seemed easy. The rookery smelled of feathers, droppings, and the faint sharp tang of old parchment and herbs. It was a cramped, circular chamber, its walls lined with perches and wicker cages, its only light filtering through narrow, arched windows that let in the morning chill. Ravens shifted and croaked, some preening, some watching with bright, clever eyes. Maester Vyman moved among them like a man accustomed to being outnumbered. His chain clinked softly as he reached for one particular bird, a soot-black creature with a scarred beak and a reputation, according to the Maester, for finding even the smallest rock in the sea. A strong flyer, this one, Vyman said as he eased the raven onto a leather-wrapped arm. He's seen Dragonstone's towers once before. If the winds are kind, he may see them again. Catelyn stood with her back to the open window, the wind tugging at her hair. Robb was beside her, his face set. The letter they had labored over half the night was in Vyman's hands now, its words dry on the parchment if not yet quite settled in her heart. Read it again, Robb said. Not because he doubted the Maester's memory, but because saying the words made them more real. Vyman cleared his throat and unrolled the parchment, his fingers careful not to smudge the ink. To Stannis of House Baratheon, he began. By the grace of gods old and new, King on the Iron Throne and rightful Lord of the Seven Kingdoms, from Robb of House Stark, by the will of his lords King in the North and the Trident. The titles had been the first battleground. Catelyn had insisted they must give Stannis those he claimed for himself, or he would see insult in every line that followed. Robb had insisted his own new-forged crown must be named as well, or his lords would see surrender where there was only a maneuver. I have seen the proof of Joffrey Baratheon's falsehood, Vyman continued, eyes skimming the lines. I know the truth of his parentage, and the crimes of his mother and her kin. For the sake of my father's memory and the peace of the realm, I will not acknowledge a bastard as king. Catelyn remembered, with a shudder she did not show, the book of lineages Ned had studied so late into the night in King's Landing, the black hair of Baratheons and the golden of Lannisters. One truth had cost her husband his head. This one might yet save her sons. I have also been raised up by the lords of my realm to rule as their king, Vyman went on. They have shed blood for me, and I for them. I cannot and will not set aside the crown they have placed upon my brow." The raven shifted, claws pricking the maester's arm. His head bobbed as if impatient. "Yet the Lannisters are a common enemy," Vyman read. "They sit the throne you seek to reclaim. They hold my sisters. They have spilled innocent blood in the Riverlands and conspired in my father's murder. I will not see their crimes go unpunished. If you march upon King's Landing to claim your right, I will bring the swords of the North and the Trident to your cause, on these terms." Robb's mouth tightened as the terms were spoken aloud. Guarantees of independence for the North and Trident after the war. Confirmation of all lands and titles held by his loyal bannermen. The dismissal of Lannister-aligned wardens and officers in favor of men of unquestioned loyalty. Shared spoils of war from the West and Crownlands. I ask in return that you recognize my rule in the North and along the Trident, and aid me with ships to move my host where it may strike most keenly at our foes," Vyman finished. "If this bargain pleases you, send a man you trust under banner of truce to discuss its making. We may be of use to one another if we show wisdom. The Lannisters will be the weaker for it. By my hand at Riverrun, under the eyes of gods old and new, Robb of House Stark." The maester's voice fell silent. The ravens argued amongst themselves in harsh croaks and flutters, as if offering their own, cruder commentary. Robb stepped forward. For a moment, Catelyn thought he might ask to change some phrase. Then he simply nodded. "Send it," he said. Vyman rolled the letter and bound it with twine, sealing it with black wax impressed by the Stark direwolf and the Tully trout side by side. He tied it carefully to the raven's leg, murmuring soft nonsense as if to soothe the bird's ruffled temper. When he carried it to the window, the creature hopped from his arm to the sill, head cocked at the gray sky. "Fly swift," the maester told it. The raven launched into the chill air with a beat of black wings, was briefly a stark shape against the clouds, and then dwindled. Catelyn watched until her eyes blurred, imagining Dragonstone's jagged silhouette rising from the sea to meet it. "Now we must wait," she said. Robb's jaw clenched. "I hate waiting." Far to the east, beyond the waters of the narrow sea, Dragonstone rose from the waves like the bones of some vast, long-dead beast. Its towers were carved as dragons and its courtyards paved with scale-like stone. The sea hurled itself at its feet day and night, an endless, fruitless assault. In the shadowed gloom of the audience chamber, Stannis Baratheon sat upon a throne of black stone that older kings had favored before Dragonfire had ever kissed Westeros. The dragons carved into its arms and back seemed almost to move in the uncertain torchlight, their eyes catching the red gleam of the ruby at Melisandre's throat. "The boy writes boldly for one so green," Stannis said when Davos had finished reading Robb Stark's letter aloud. His voice was as unyielding as the rock beneath them, a grain of salt on every word. "King in the North and the Trident," he calls himself, as if shouting a thing makes it so. Davos held the parchment carefully, aware of the weight it carried. The words were blunt, yes, but not stupid. He heard no cringing flattery, but no reckless insult either. A man could work with that, perhaps. "He has won battles," Davos said cautiously. "The young wolf, they call him in the camps, broke the Lannister host in the Whispering Wood, took Jaime Lannister captive. He is not without teeth." "Puppies have teeth," Stannis said. "They nip at your heel and think they are wolves." He rose from the throne with a restless motion, the heavy cloth of his dark doublet whispering. "He presumes to offer me terms, to speak of what I must recognize, as if my brother's realm were his to divide. He offers you his swords," Davos said. "That is not nothing. The Lannisters have the Reach at their backs and the Redwyne fleet in the offing. Your Grace's claim is the truest in law, but law alone will not storm the walls of King's Landing. Northern steel would help." Melisandre shifted beside the throne, the red silk of her gown rustling like embers. The light from the torches seemed to gather at the ruby glowing at her throat. "The boy is a spark," she said. Her voice was low and musical, with the faintest trace of some Essosi cadence. "Bright for a moment, brief, The Lord of Light is in him, but it flickers. He has not been tempered in the true fires yet. Stannis shot her an irritable look. He is a rebel like the others, he said, like Renly was. Like Balon Greyjoy, they rose against lawful rule and weakened the realm. They are part of the disease I must cut away. Davos remembered another day, another chamber, when Robert Baratheon had laughed and thrown an arm around Eddard Stark's shoulders, wine spilling on his doublet. He remembered the look on Ned's face then. Affection, exasperation, duty. He wondered what that dead man would make of his son now. With respect, Your Grace, Davos said. Robb Stark's father died because he sought to do what was right, to tell the truth of Joffrey's birth. The boy fights the Lannisters for that. The people of the Riverlands call him deliverer, not traitor. If you call him the same, you might win more than his swords. You might win their hearts. Robert had their hearts, Stannis said shortly. See what it brought him, and them. His mouth thinned. For a moment, the iron facade slipped, and Davos glimpsed the man beneath. The younger brother who had watched Storm's End starve while his elder feasted on glory. The man who had taken Dragonstone instead of Storm's End because Robert had decided it would be so. A man who had never been loved as much as he had deserved, and hated that it mattered. Melisandre stepped closer, the ruby at her throat pulsing faintly. The night is dark and full of terrors, she said, almost gently. The great other moves in the cold lands beyond the wall. Shadows stir. This boy and his wolves are threads in the tapestry, nothing more. Yet even a thread can be woven into a sword's grip. She turned her gaze to Davos. He felt it like heat on his skin. Bring him to heel, she said to Stannis. Use his strength if you must. If he is wise, he will bend. If he is stubborn, he will break. The fires will show which way he leans. We will not be lighting any fires beneath this boy yet, Stannis snapped. I will not give the Lannisters the pleasure of watching us devour one another, not while they sit on my throne. He turned away, toward the narrow window that looked out on the restless sea. Outside, waves hurled themselves against rock, over and over, wearing it down by inches across the years. Send him an answer, Stannis said abruptly. Davos will carry it. I will not stoop to call him king in any respect, but I will hear him. If his swords are loyal, they will march at my command. If not, he shrugged once. There is always the wall, or the grave. The wind off the narrow sea cut through cloth and flesh alike, sharp with salt and the promise of storms. Davos Seaworth pulled his cloak tighter around himself as he walked the quay, the slap of waves against stone echoing under the steady creak of rigging and the low shouts of men at work. The ship that waited for him was not large, a weathered cog with patches on her sails and a hull scarred by years of hard use. Davos knew her kind. She had the look of a vessel that had hauled more fish and smuggler's cargo than noblemen. That suited him well enough. Ser Davos, the captain called, raising a hand in greeting from the gangplank. We're near ready. Wind's not favorable, but she'll do. Where do we head? Then, Riverrun, Davos said. The word tasted odd on his tongue. He had never been so far upriver. His life had been spent between ports and islands, always within reach of salt spray. Now he would sail into the green heart of a land at war. The captain whistled softly. Into the wolf's den, is it? Hope they like onions. They like enemies of the Lannisters, Davos said. That will have to be enough. He thought of the letter tucked inside his doublet, sealed with the crowned stag and the flaming heart of Lawler. Stannis's words were as blunt as ever, though somewhat tempered by Davos's own cautious suggestions. No recognition of Robb's crown. No mention of him as anything but the Stark boy or Lord of Winterfell. Yet there was a willingness to parley, to hear terms. It was more than he had expected, if he were honest. He paused at the foot of the gangplank and looked back. Dragonstone loomed above him, all jagged spires and carved dragons, its black stone damp with mist. On the highest tower, Melisandre's red shape was a small smear of color against the gloom, watching. Or perhaps that was only his imagination. "Will you be calling on your lord's red woman when you return?" the captain asked, following his gaze. "My men talk. They say she can make the sea catch fire and the shadows walk." Davos suppressed a sigh. "Men talk," he said. "They said I was the most honest smuggler in the narrow sea once. You see how much that was worth." He climbed the gangplank, the boards shifting faintly under his boots. The deck smelled of tar, wet rope, and old fish, familiar scents, comforting in their way. As the crew cast off and the cog drifted out into the gray rollers, Davos went to the bow and gripped the railing, watching Dragonstone recede. The fortress did not grow any less grim with distance. It was a place made for war and storms, not peace. He wondered what Riverrun would look like. He had pictured it as Stannis was, in truth. Stern, square, practical, its beauty all in its usefulness. The tales said otherwise, though. They spoke of a castle wrapped in rivers, of banners bright as autumn leaves, of a lady from the south who had ruled in the north, Catelyn Stark. He had seen her once, from a distance, when Robert made his one royal progress to Dragonstone. She had been younger then, her hair a richer auburn, her belly heavy with the child who must now be the king in the north. She had smiled at something Ned Stark said, and Davos remembered thinking at the time that some men had fortunes deeper than any smuggler could earn. Now both of them were dead, and their son was a king. The sails bellied as the cog caught the wind. Dragonstone dwindled. The sea stretched ahead, and Davos found himself murmuring a prayer to both the Seven and the Red God he did not quite claim. Let this errand go well, he thought. Let there be sense in the boy from the snows. The wind did not answer, but it did not turn against him either. The Raven came 6 days later, just as the mists were lifting off the rivers and a pale sun made the wet stones of Riverrun steam. Catelyn held her breath as Maester Vyman broke the seal before the War Council, the stamped stag and flaming heart cracking like brittle bone. Stannis's reply was short. Stannis's replies always were. Davos's suggestion that he soften some of the language had carved off the sharpest edges, but there was no disguising who had written it. "He will send an envoy," Vyman said after reading it twice, lips moving, "to discuss terms, under banner of truce." A murmur ran through the hall. Karstark looked affronted, as if the very thought of speaking with a Baratheon was an insult to the memory of his dead sons. The Great John grinned, baring teeth. "Good," he said. "We'll see what sort of man this king is by the dog he sends sniffing at our door." "The man is Davos Seaworth," Brynden Tully said. "I've heard the name. Smuggler raised to knighthood for running a siege. They call him the Onion Knight." "Stannis raises smugglers above lords now?" Karstark sneered. "Stannis rewards men who kept his garrison from eating shoe leather." "I've heard," Brynden replied. "It says something of him, that he remembers who kept him alive when Robert was winning songs." Robb said nothing until the murmuring died. He felt the eyes upon him like a weight. Every decision seemed to add another stone to the load he carried, another ghost watching to see whether he would falter. "Arrange the parley," he told his mother. "We'll host Seaworth here. I will not say to my men that we are too fearful to hear what our enemies' enemies have to offer." "Not enemies," Catelyn said. "Not yet. That is the point." The days that followed were full of small, precise preparations. Not the bustle of mustering for war, but something quieter and more brittle. Who would stand at Robb's side when he received the envoy? What words would be said? How many guards would be present, and where they would be placed? The banners that would hang in the hall, Stark, Tully, the direwolf, and the trout, no others. Catelyn oversaw most of it, moving through the tasks with a calm efficiency that belied the tightness in her chest. She had sat in on enough negotiations in her life to know that battles could be won and lost with words as easily as with steel, and that one careless phrase could cut a man's throat as surely as a blade. On the morning the envoy was due, she stood at Robb's shoulder at the head of the hall as the servants cleared away the last of the breakfast trenchers. Robb wore no crown today, only a stark cloak over plain leather. Gray wind lay at his feet, eyes half closed but ears pricked. Roose Bolton stood to the right, pale and silent, his flayed man banner folded behind him like a threat she could not quite see. Brynden Tully was to the left, one hand resting on the pommel of his sword. They made an odd tableau, she thought. A dead man's brother, a pale lord with a sigil that promised fear, a boy wearing a kingdom on his shoulders. The ship was sighted at first light, Brynden said. They came upriver under a white flag. Sensible. He would not be Stannis's man if he were not, Catelyn replied. The great doors of the hall creaked then, with protesting iron hinges. A shaft of watery daylight slipped in, carrying with it the scent of river and wet grass. Catelyn's heart gave a small, inexplicable leap. A man entered, flanked by a handful of guards in plain livery. He wore no crest on his cloak, no gaudy jewels. His face was weathered, darkened by sun and salt, his beard trimmed short. The fingers of his left hand were oddly shaped, as if cut and healed badly. His eyes, when they lifted to the dais, were wary but direct. He bowed, but not too deeply. "Your Grace," he said to Robb, his voice rough with the sea. "My lady, I am Ser Davos Seaworth of Dragonstone. I come bearing the words of Stannis Baratheon." "Rise, Ser Davos," Robb said. His own voice held steady, though Catelyn could feel the tension humming in him through the closeness of their stand. "You are welcome in Riverrun, under my roof and my protection, so long as the truce holds. Let us speak of kings and wars, then, and see if any good can be made of them." Davos had been in grander halls, if not many. King's Landing's throne room had been a place of gilded menace. Its vaulted ceilings and dragonskull alcoves bred to make men feel small before the Iron Throne. Dragonstone's audience chamber was older, darker, weighed with a different kind of history. Riverrun's hall was something else. It was not as vast as King's Landing's, nor as ancient as Dragonstone's, but there was a lived insolidity to it that reminded him oddly of the better sort of tavern. One where men had laughed and argued and courted and mourned for generations. The stone underfoot felt worn rather than cold. The banners above, trout and direwolf intertwined, seemed to move with the currents of the hall's air like living things. The boy on the dais was not what Davos had expected. He had anticipated something more callow, perhaps. Some pretty youth puffed up by victory, flush with the flattery of gray-bearded lords. Robb Stark did not look like a boy who had had much use for flattery. He was young, yes, with the soft remnants of childhood not completely burned from his features. But there was an oldness in his eyes that Davos knew too well. Men who watched their fathers die alone in foreign cities. Men who had seen ships go down in storms with friends and brothers aboard. Men who had stood between hunger and survival, that looked crossed ages. "Ser Davos," Robb said, "I know of you, Stannis Baratheon smuggler, made knight for your service in his war." "Once a smuggler, Davos said. There was no shame in the word, not anymore. Stannis had burned most of that out of him with the tips of his fingers. "Now your Grace's guest. Will that serve?" Robb's mouth twitched, almost a smile. "We shall see," he said. "You said you bore Stannis's words." He descended the few steps from the dais rather than sending a servant to collect the letter as a more punctilious king might. The movement was unhurried, but it rattled Davos more than a show of hauteur would have done. Stannis would have stayed on the throne and let petitioners crane their necks. Up close, the Stark boy smelled faintly of leather, steel, and the lingering hint of horse. His hand, when he took the letter, was roughened by callous. Davos had shaken hands with lords whose palms were softer than a maid's. This one had held a sword in truth. "It says much the same as his first message," Davos said cautiously as Robb broke the seal. "But with some additions. His Grace holds to his claim. He will not acknowledge any other king in Westeros while he lives." "Of course he will not," Robb said, scanning the lines. "If he did, he would not be Stannis." Catelyn Stark stepped down from the dais as well, skirts whispering. She moved with the controlled grace of a woman who had spent half her life in courts and the other half in harsher places, and had learned to carry herself like armor in both. Her eyes, when they fixed on Davos, were cool and assessing. Does he speak at all, she asked, of the terms we proposed? Of the North and the Trident being free of Southern rule once the war is won. He speaks of order, Davos said, because it was the only honest answer. Of law, of unity. Stannis Baratheon believes in a realm, my lady, not in 7 pieces of one. But he is not blind to the truth of things. He knows you have won battles he has not yet had the chance to fight. He knows he needs your strength if he is to unseat the Lannisters. Robb looked up from the letter. What does he offer? Davos wet his lips. Guardianship of the North and the Trident under your line, he said. In perpetuity as Warden of the North and Lord Protector of the Trident, he calls it. Your lords would owe fealty to the Iron Throne in name, but you would hold their oaths. No Southern lord would be placed above you in your own lands. His grace offers pardon for all who followed you against Joffrey's regime. And he offers ships. How many? Brynden Tully asked from behind them. Enough to move 10,000 men at once, Davos said. More if the weather and the tides favor us. Enough to deny the Lannisters safety behind their walls. Roose Bolton's pale gaze flickered. And in return? He asked. In return, Davos said. Stannis Baratheon asks that you recognize him as your rightful king, in word and in deed. That you bring your host south when he calls, to fight under his banners against all who would dispute his claim. That you bend the knee to him as your lord paramount. In truth, if not in every song your men sing in their tents. They gathered once more around the war table, but this time the air was sharper, the lines between them more defined. It was one thing to speak of ideas, of alliances and crowns in the abstract. It was another to have the parchment on the table before them, the ink still smelling faintly of iron and smoke. Robb laid Stannis's letter beside his own. The 2 pieces of parchment looked almost identical to an untrained eye. Same size, same color, same neat, compressed script. The differences were all in the words. So we kneel, Karstark said flatly, after Davos had repeated the terms more fully in front of the assembled lords. Dress it up in any pretty Southron title you like. We kneel to a man who calls us rebels in one breath and begs our swords in the next. We kneel in word, perhaps, Brynden said. In law. The world is built on law as much as on steel, Lord Karstark. Stannis's law would bind us less tightly than Joffrey's chains. If the boy accepts, he will hold the North and the Trident as his father did under Robert, but with more teeth. Roose Bolton traced a finger along the painted line of the Trident. And if the king on Dragonstone wins without us? He asked. If we refuse, and his banners still fly over the Red Keep, then he will turn his attention north, Davos said simply. He's not a man to suffer defiance for long. Forgive me, your grace, but that is the truth of it. Stannis Baratheon will see the realm whole again, or he will see it burn trying. The great Jon laughed, though there was less humor in it than before. I like this one, he said, jerking a thumb at Davos. He's honest enough to be a northerner. Shame he's hitched his wagon to a rock. Ships, Robb said, as if tasting the word. He picked up a little wooden ship carved by some long-dead Tully lord and rolled it between his fingers. We have horses. We have men. We can harry Tywin, bleed him, but not break him where he hides behind his walls. With ships, we could strike at the Golden Tooth at Lannisport, at King's Landing itself. Our men are not sailors, Karstark said. Men can learn to stand on decks as well as they learn to sit a saddle, Brynden replied. And the Ironborn have not yet declared openly. If Balon Greyjoy chooses this moment to seize the western coast while we bicker, we will regret not having any say in the disposition of the king's fleets. Catelyn listened to them argue, weighing each word. She watched Davos as much as the lords. He did not try to flatter or cajole. He answered questions bluntly, admitting where his knowledge or his king's reach fell short. When asked what Stannis would do if the North declared open independence after the war, he did not pretend there would be no consequences. He will not like it, Davos said. He believes a realm should be won under one law, but he is not blind. If the North has bled and starved and burned for his war, he will count that. If you remain loyal in deed and pay your taxes, he may find a way to reconcile it with his sense of justice. In other words, Roose murmured, he may look the other way if it suits him. In other words, Davos said, he will weigh justice and need as any ruler must. Robb set the little ship down carefully on the painted sea beside Dragonstone's sigil. For a long moment, no one spoke. The fire crackled. Somewhere in the depths of the castle, a dog barked. I remember, Robb said slowly, sitting at my father's table in Winterfell when I was very small, listening while he and Maester Luwin talked of Robert and Stannis and Renly. I did not understand the names then, only that my father spoke of them with a kind of sadness, as if they were storms that would pass over our heads but leave the south changed forever. His hand moved, touching the carved wolf that marked his host, then the stag, then the lion. The storm has come north, he said. We can no longer pretend it will break before it reaches us. If I hold to this crown above all else, I may win songs. For a time. But songs will not feed the north if its fields are burned. They will not rebuild Harrenhal or the villages the Lannisters have wasted. They will not bring my sisters home. Catelyn's throat tightened. What do you mean to do? She asked, though she thought she knew. Robb looked up. His gaze passed over each of his lords in turn, weighing them as surely as they weighed him. I will not set aside the crown you gave me, he said. I am king in the north and the Trident. That will not change in my heart, nor in yours, I hope. But I will bend my knee to Stannis Baratheon as my father bent his knee to Robert, if that is the price of breaking the Lannisters and keeping our people alive. Karstark made a choking sound of protest. The Greyjoy's brows shot up. Roose Bolton's face remained a mask, but his eyes gleamed faintly. We will call it what Stannis wishes in his letters and in his laws, Robb went on. We will sign what we must sign, but our swords will be our own, and our lands will be ruled by northern lords. If he honors that, we will stand beside him. If he breaks faith, his hand dropped to the hilt of his sword. Then he will learn that wolves bite as hard as they kneel. He turned to Davos. Tell your king this, Ser Davos. Tell him I will come to Storm's End to seal this pact in person, and that when I leave, it will be with his promise in my hand and his ships in my rivers. Together we will bring down the lions. After that, we shall see what kind of realm is born from the ashes. Davos studied his face, the set of his jaw, the steady light in his eyes. He saw Stannis' stubbornness there, and Ned Stark's quiet strength, and something else. Something that belonged to the North alone. I will tell him, Davos said. And I pray to whatever gods still listen that both of you prove as wise as you hope to be. Grey wind rose then, stretching, his great jaws parting in a sound that was not quite a howl and not quite a growl. Tea rolled through the hall like distant thunder, setting the ravens in the rookery to restless croaking, making men shift and shiver without knowing why. Outside, beyond Riverrun's walls, the rivers flowed on, indifferent. But within, lines had been drawn, not just on maps, but in men's hearts. The young wolf had chosen his path, knowing it would lead him not only toward the lions, but toward the stag with fire at his back. The game of crowns had become a game of alliances, and somewhere far to the north, beyond the wall, in places where no king's banners flew, older things stirred in the cold and watched with eyes of ice. The sea was an old enemy and an old friend to Davos Seaworth. It heaved beneath the hull with a sullen, restless energy, waves slapping at the planks with hollow palms. Spray stung his face, salty and cold, and the wind tore at his cloak as if it were trying to strip him bare. He braced his feet against the rise and fall of the deck and let the motion seep into his bones, the old sailor's sway returning to him as naturally as breath. Storm building, the captain muttered beside him, squinting up at the bruised dark clouds gathering like conspirators along the horizon. We'll be lucky to make harbor before it breaks. We've had worse, Davos said. It was true. He had ridden out storms that had torn the masts from ships and scattered men like driftwood. Still, he offered a small concession to that other, harsher truth he had seen in the flames against his will. Best we not rely on luck alone. The sealed letter weighed against his chest, tucked inside his doublet. The wax had been impressed with more care this time. The Stark dire wolf and the Tully trout side by side, joined like allies rather than merely neighbors. Robb Stark's hand had been firm when he signed it, the ink dark and unblotted. There had been no tremor, no hesitation. "I will come to Storm's End," the boy had said. "I will kneel if I must, for the good of my people. But I will not forget why I rise again." Davos had seen pride in him, yes, but not the hollow swagger of so many young lords. There was a weight to the boy's gaze, a way he carried the memory of his father like a cloak of stone. He had liked him in spite of himself. "You're getting soft, old fool," he thought. "Liking has no place in this. Stannis is your king. The realm is at stake." Even so, as the ship plowed onward and Dragonstone's jagged silhouette rose against the reddening sky, Davos found himself thinking of the map in Riverrun's hall, of the little carved wolf and stag, shoved closer together, of Catelyn Stark's eyes, full of weariness and hard, necessary hope. If this alliance holds, he thought, the Lannisters will be hard-pressed indeed. If it fails, we add one more crack to a realm already split like old oak. The clouds thickened. A spit of rain turned into a steady sheet, drumming on the deck. The men cursed and laughed and wrestled with lines, their bodies moving with the sure-footed dance of those who had made their peace with an unstable world. Davos stayed at the bow until the first low roll of thunder muttered across the water. Only then did he turn away, gripping the railing as a particularly large wave pitched the ship sideways. "Bring her in hard," the captain shouted. "Give me every scrap of sail she'll take. I'd rather step onto Dragonstone's cursed rocks than drown within sight of them." "Aye, that makes two of us," Davos said under his breath. He touched the place where the letter rested again, more habit than fear. A scrap of parchment, ink and wax and words. Men died for less. Kings rose and fell on less. If the sea was kind, and it rarely was, but sometimes it could be less cruel, they would make harbor before the storm broke. Then it would be Stannis' storm he had to weather, and there was no safe harbor there at all. The storm hit the castle like a thrown fist not long after Davos made land. Thunder boomed above Dragonstone's towers as if the sky itself were cracking. Rain came in sheets, a living wall that blurred the world to gray. The sea threw itself at the rocks with such fury that spray reached the high windows of the audience chamber in sudden, startling bursts. Inside, the air smelled of damp stone and smoke and something else. The oily, unfamiliar tang of the strange incense Melisandre favored when she called upon her god. The brazier at the center of the hall roared with unnatural vigor, its flames tall and oddly still despite the drafts that tugged at tapestries. Stannis stood beside it, a dark bulk in plain, well-worn mail. There were no jewels on him, no ornaments save the stags on his breast and cloak clasp. His face was set in its habitual scowl, but there was a tightness around his eyes Davos had learned to read as interest. "You've been gone longer than I liked," he said by way of greeting. "Did the boy chain you to his table and drown you in Tully wine?" Davos knelt, the stone bit into his knees. He held out the letter in both hands, fingers closing around it carefully so he would not drop it in the flames. He thought before he spoke. "Your Grace," Davos said, "that takes time. The rivers are not so kind as the sea when it comes to travel, either." Stannis made a low sound that might have been a snort or a grunt. It was hard to tell with him. He took the letter without ceremony and broke the seal with his thumb. The wax cracked neatly. He had strong hands, for all his leanness. As Stannis read, Melisandre's eyes were on Davos. She stood on the other side of the brazier, the red silk of her gown catching the firelight. Her hair fell in dark waves about her shoulders, unbound. The ruby at her throat pulsed with a slow, heartbeat glow, as if answering to some rhythm beneath the stone. "You have seen the Wolf King," she said. It was not a question. "Yes, my lady," Davos said warily. The heat from the brazier pressed against his face, but he did not move back. Robb Stark. They call him the Young Wolf. The boy has many names in the flames, she murmured. Son of Ice, Son of Death. A sword whose edge has not yet decided which way it will cut. Her gaze drifted back to the fire, as if some pattern there had caught her notice. Davos followed it despite himself. In the dancing orange and gold, he saw nothing but the shifting of wood and heat. To her, he knew there were armies and shadows. Stannis lowered the letter at last, his jaw working. He will kneel, he said. He says it here in so many words. I will do as my father did, and bend the knee to the rightful king, if my people can be spared needless suffering. There was something like grim satisfaction in his tone, as if the world had finally consented to follow the lines he had drawn for it long ago. He also speaks of his crown, Stannis went on, again and again, king in the north and the Trident. It clings to him like a burr. He will not say otherwise in front of his men, Davos said cautiously. They raised him on their shields. They have bled for that name. Stannis's eyes flicked to him. Do you think I do not know what it is to bleed for a name? He asked. I held Storm's End for Robert while he chased glory in the south. I kept my men alive on rats and shoe leather and whatever filth we could find. When the Targaryens fell, did he offer me the crown? No, he gave me this rock. He made a sharp gesture that seemed to include the dragons on the walls, the roaring fire, the storm outside. He gave Storm's End to Renly, who never starved a day in his life. Davos did not flinch. He had heard this before. You have what you have now, your grace, he said. A true claim, men who follow you because they believe in law, and the chance to add the swords of the north to that cause. Stannis's mouth thinned. The boy will come to Storm's End, he said. He says so. To swear his fealty as you urged. He will have his ships when he has done so and not before. Melisandre's voice slid into the space between them like silk over a blade. Be cautious, she said. The wolf is proud. Pride burns poorly. It leaves too much ash. Stannis shot her a brief, irritated look. You saw him in your flames? I saw his shadow, she said. I saw him standing amid snow and blood, with a crown of ice on his brow. I saw him tearing the throats from lions. And I saw him standing on a wall of black stone, looking north while fires died behind him. Davos's skin prickled. Is he friend or foe then? He asked before he could stop himself. Melisandre smiled, a small, secret thing. That depends, she said, on who holds the leash when the wolf runs. Stannis folded the letter with careful, deliberate motions. Send word to Storm's End, he said to no one in particular. The king in the north comes to bend his knee. The garrison will be ready to receive him, and see that the men remember he is a guest, not a prisoner, until he proves otherwise. He turned back to Davos. You will sail again, he said, ahead of him this time. I want northern ships shepherded into our harbor, not lurking off some cove where I cannot watch them. You will be our bridge, Onion Knight. Pray it does not break beneath us. The day Robb Stark left Riverrun to ride south was unexpectedly fair. After weeks of rain and gray skies, the sun had burned through the clouds with an almost petulant insistence, gilding the castle's wet stones and setting rivulets of water sparkling as they ran down the walls. The air had the clean, sharp feel that came after a storm had finally spent itself. In the inner yard, horses stamped and snorted, breath pluming in the chill as grooms checked girths and bridles. Armorers moved among the men, tightening straps and adjusting the hang of mail shirts. The small party that would ride with Robb to Storm's End was chosen for speed and necessity. A handful of northern lords, some picked men-at-arms, a scribe, a standard-bearer. Enough to show he did not come as a supplicant alone, not so many as to seem an invading host. The great John sat his massive destrier like a man born to war, grinning as he yanked at a stirrup strap. Southern keeps, he boomed, loud enough for the entire yard to hear. Southern air, southern wine. Might find myself some southern wench who doesn't mind a bit of northern frost on her belly. You'll find southern walls and southern swords, Brynden Tully said dryly from where he stood by his own horse. "Remember, this is a parley, not a raid, my lord. We want their ships, not their daughters." The Great John barked laughter. "Who says we can't have both?" Karstark was not among those riding. He stood with the other lords watching, his long face sour, arms folded over his chest. Robb had not been blind to the storm brewing in the older man's eyes since the decision to ally with Stannis. It was one reason he had chosen to leave him at Riverrun, where Catelyn and Edmure could keep him close and channel his fury toward the Lannisters on their doorstep. Roose Bolton had asked to ride, in his soft, unassuming way. "It would be wise," he had said, "for the North to have more than one voice in any discussion of long-term oaths. I have some small experience in such matters." Robb had declined, politely but firmly. Bolton's presence in a negotiation with a man as rigid as Stannis seemed to him like adding oil to a banked fire. Better to keep him in the Riverlands, where his ruthlessness could be turned against the Freys and Lannister raiders. Now it fell to the Blackfish to represent Tully interests on the road, and to the Great John to embody northern bluntness. Between Bryndon's seasoned pragmatism and Umber's exuberant loyalty, Robb hoped to find a balance. Catelyn's hand was warm on his arm, her grip firm enough to bruise through the leather of his sleeve. Her eyes searched his face as if trying to memorize every line of it. "I should go with you," she said, for the third time that morning. "You have more wars to fight here," Robb said gently. "Edmure needs you, so do the River Lords. Walder Frey is already prickling at our slightest slight. If he thinks we have left him behind for good, he'll be in Tywin's bed before the week is out." Her mouth tightened. "I can handle Walder Frey," she said. "I have done so for years. I can also stand beside you when you face a Baratheon king and his Red Priestess." "I know," he said, and meant it. "But if both of us are gone, who will stand between Edmure and his more earnest impulses?" As if summoned by the mention of his name, Edmure strode into the yard, adjusting his sword belt. He looked both proud and harried, like a man who had just realized the high seat he coveted came with splinters. "You leave me your castle and your troubles both, nephew," he called, forcing cheer into his voice. "I'm not sure which weighs more." "You've been wanting command all your life, uncle," Robb answered with a faint smile. "Now you have it. Hold the lines along the Trident. Keep an eye on Frey. Bleed the Lannisters where you can, but don't let them pin you. When I bring Stannis' ships up the Blackwater, I want Tywin Lannister looking both ways at once." The mention of ships sent a ripple through the listening men. It made the alliance seem real in a way it had not before, a future where northern banners flew on southern seas. Catelyn drew Robb into a brief, fierce embrace. For a heartbeat he was a boy again, smelling lavender and wool and the faintest trace of flour from some long-ago kitchen. Then she released him, and the weight of his sword and cloak settled back into place. "Remember what we spoke of," she said, her voice low. "Yield where you must in words, not in truth. Do not let him shame you into more. And watch the Red Woman's eyes. She sees things men were not meant to see." "I'll remember," he said. Gray wind brushed against his knee, pressing his great head into Robb's hand. The direwolf's golden eyes were fixed on the open gate, where the road stretched south like a promise and a threat. Robb swung into the saddle in one fluid motion. From this height, the yard seemed smaller, more contained. His mother, his uncle, his bannermen, all the pieces of his life in Riverrun arranged below him like the carved tokens on his war map. "Open the gate," he commanded. The chains clanked. The portcullis rose. Sunlight spilled onto the road beyond. The young wolf clicked his tongue, and his horse moved forward. The retinue fell in around him, banners lifting, hoofs striking a rhythm on the cobbles that echoed off the stone. As they rode out of the shadow of Riverrun's walls, Robb did not look back. He could feel his mother's gaze on his shoulders like a second cloak. He did not trust himself to bear both and still ride straight. The Riverlands wore their wounds openly. As Robb's party rode south, the signs of war multiplied like scars on old flesh. Fields that should have been green with late crops lay churned into muck, their furrows trampled by boot and hoof. Farmhouses sagged blackened and hollow, their thatch long since burned away. In some places, only chimneys stood, solitary fingers pointing accusation at the sky. They passed a village where half the houses had been stripped to their foundations, the timbers hauled away for siege works or firewood. Children peered at them from behind stone walls, their faces pinched and too thin. A woman with a baby at her breast watched the riders with hard, measuring eyes, her hand resting on the handle of a pitchfork. "They don't cheer," the great John observed, not unkindly, as they rode through. "When last we came this way, they waved and shouted. Through flowers, some of them. Now they look at us like we're just another storm." "Storms don't wear wolf pelts," Brynden Tully said, "but they trample just the same." Robb's jaw clenched. He wanted to stop, to dismount and speak to them, to tell them that their suffering fed his anger, that he rode now to forge a weapon that might end this. But he knew how little words weighed in the scales against empty bellies and dead sons. "We've been through here twice," he said. "The Lannisters have come through 4 times as often. You cannot blame the Smallfolk for failing to distinguish between hobnailed boots." One of the children, a girl of perhaps 7, dared to step out as gray wind loped past. She stared at the dire wolf with open awe tinged by fear. When Robb met her gaze, she ducked her head and skittered back behind her mother's skirts, vanishing like a wisp of smoke. "How many more burned farms do you think we'll see before this ends?" the great John asked. "As many as there are in the realm," Brynden said. "If the Lannisters keep the throne." Robb did not answer. The words curdled in his throat. He felt the weight of every barren field like a stone in his saddlebags. Each charred timber, each hollow-eyed stare, was another tally on a ledger he meant to present to Tywin Lannister in blood. At their first camp, on the banks of a muddy stream, he walked the perimeter as the men set up tents and hobbled horses. The smell of stew, thin but hot, came from the cook fires, overlaying the musk of damp wool and horse sweat. The blackfish joined him without comment, matching his stride. "You're thinking of the people," Brynden said after a time. "That's good. Some kings forget them as soon as they have a crown." "I don't feel much like a king," Robb said. "I feel like a man walking through the wreckage of his own choices." "Some of this would have happened whether you rode to war or stayed at Winterfell," Brynden said. "Joffrey would still have cut your father's head off. Tywin would still have sent his raiders. The Riverlands have always been the anvil where southern kings hammer out their feuds. Your choice was whether to leave us to it or bring the north to share the blows." Robb stopped at the water's edge. The stream reflected the sky in broken shards, where ripples from the current shattered the image. "And now I've chosen to bend the knee to another southern king," he said. "My father's ghost is shaking his head somewhere." "Your father bent his knee to Robert," Brynden said. "I was there, remember? He did it because it was the best way to protect his people from another generation of dragonfire. You do this for the same reason." Ned Stark wasn't the sort of man to begrudge his son for following his example. Gray wind padded up, shook himself, and sent a spray of cold water across Robb's boots. The dire wolf then leaned against him with the casual entitlement of a creature that had never doubted its place in his world. "Stannis is no Robert," Robb said, resting a hand in the thick fur. "He will not laugh and clap my shoulder and call me brother." "No," Brynden agreed. "He will be hard and humorless, and his pride will chafe against yours. But he will keep his word once given. That is worth more than all the charm in the 7 kingdoms. Let us hope his red woman has not convinced him otherwise," Robb muttered. Brynden's mouth twisted. "I do not like the sound of her," he admitted. "Priests who see only one god in the world are dangerous enough. Priests who see only one god in the fire seem worse. But you will not be alone there. Ser Davos struck me as a man who knows which end of a sword is for swinging and which is for falling on. And there is this, too. If Stannis means to try any sorcery on you, he will find the north has its own shadows, and not all of them burn." The older man's eyes drifted to gray wind. The dire wolf lifted his head, nostrils flaring as if scenting some distant threat. Robb thought of the way the Freys had looked at his crown, and of Walder Frey's pinched, avaricious face. He thought of Roose Bolton's pale eyes and quiet voice, of Tywin Lannister somewhere to the west, counting his losses and planning how to make others bleed for them. The world was full of storms, and many war faces. They reached the coast 3 days later, where the Riverlands gave way to salt and cliff. The last stretch of road wound down a series of switchbacks carved into the rock, the sea appearing and disappearing between turns like a great, living thing breathing in the distance. The air smelled different here, less of damp earth and smoke, more of brine and rotting kelp. At the bottom, a narrow strip of stony beach cradled a makeshift dock of rough-hewn planks. 2 cogs floated beyond it, their hulls dark in the dawn light, their masts rising like stark crosses against the paling sky. Men moved about their decks, hauling lines and checking sails. The banners that hung from their sterns bore the crowned stag and the flaming heart, both rendered in simple, practical cloth that would catch the wind better than heavy heraldic silk. Davos stood on the dock with his hands tucked into his sleeves for warmth. His cloak snapped in the breeze, the onion badge at his breast dulled by the salt air. When he saw the direwolf banner crest the last bend in the road, followed by the Trout of Tully and the leaping giant of Umber, he let out a breath he had not known he was holding. "Never thought I'd be glad to see a wolf riding toward me," the captain of the nearer cog muttered. "But there it is. War makes strange comfort," Davos said. Robb's horse picked its way carefully down the last stretch. The young wolf looked different with salt wind in his hair, Davos thought. Less like a boy from the snows, more like some half-tamed thing out of the old stories, riding at the meeting of land and sea with a ghost beast at his heels. Grey Wind did not seem to care for the cliffs. His ears were pricked, his nostrils flaring as he scented the unfamiliar tang of the ocean. When the first wave rolled up to hiss at his paws, he bared his teeth, but did not retreat. "Ser Davos," Robb called, reining in. "You made good time. Better than the sea this once," Davos replied. "Your grace." He inclined his head. "Storm's End waits." The great John eyed the cogs with a mixture of suspicion and interest. "Never did like boats," he said. "Unnatural, floating on water like that. Still, if it gets me to a place where I can plant a flag in a Lannister, I'll stomach it." "Storm's End is Baratheon, not Lannister," Brynden reminded him. "Try not to plant your flag in anyone until we're sure which way they're facing." The transition from horse to ship was awkward for men more used to saddle than deck. The planks creaked and shifted under northern boots, and more than one lord had to catch himself on a rail as the cog rocked. Robb took it in stride, though Davos could see the slight tightening around his mouth that spoke of a man refusing to show discomfort. Grey Wind proved the greater challenge. The dire wolf did not like the gangplank, no matter how firmly Robb spoke to him. It took a full quarter hour, 3 pieces of dried meat, and the Greyjohn's booming encouragement. "Come on then, beast, it's only the sea. I've drunk more ale than that in a sitting," to coax him aboard. When he finally leaped onto the deck, he stood with all 4 paws spread wide, as if expecting the world to tilt him into the water. "These decks were not built for wolves," Davos said under his breath. "These times were not built for them either," Robb answered, stroking Grey Wind's neck until the hackles smoothed. "Yet here we are." As the cogs pushed off, leaving the shore to dwindle behind them, a hush fell on the northern men that had nothing to do with fear. Many had never seen the sea before. They watched the waves with a kind of wary wonder, as if it were a beast whose size made it holy. "It goes on forever," one young man-at-arms murmured, leaning on the rail. "Not quite," Davos said. "But far enough that you'd drown before you found an end if you fell over. Best you don't." Robb stood near the prow, one hand on the railing, the other never straying far from Grey Wind's fur. The wind tugged at his hair and cloak, drawing tears from the corners of his eyes that had nothing to do with emotion. "What is Storm's End like?" he asked after a time, not taking his eyes off the horizon. "Old," Davos said. "Stubborn, like its lord. Its walls are thicker than any castle I've seen. The storms throw themselves at it and break. Men say a sorcerer raised it in the Dawn Age to hold back the sea itself. Robb huffed a faint, humorless laugh. My father told me stories of it when I was a boy, he said. He said it was a place where men learned what it meant to endure. Perhaps that is why Stannis suits it so well. Perhaps, Davos agreed. He did not speak of the siege, of rats and boiled leather and the desperate, hungry eyes of men who had gone too long without hope. Of how it had been Robert's victory in the south that had finally broken the Targaryens. Yet it had been Stannis' stubborn refusal to yield that had kept a vital piece of the board from falling. The sea rolled on, indifferent. Above them, gulls wheeled and shrieked. Somewhere, far ahead, Storm's End waited, perched like a clenched fist on the edge of the world. They sighted Storm's End at dusk of the second day, rising out of the gathering gloom like some vast, brooding creature hunched over the sea. Its walls were not graceful like those of Riverrun, nor imposing in their height alone. They were thick, round, and defiant, built not to impress but to endure. Where other castles had towers, Storm's End had bastions, squat and powerful, their few windows narrow as arrow slits. As the cogs drew nearer, the sea's swell changed, pushed and pulled by the unseen contours of the cliffs. Waves smashed themselves into froth against rocks far below the fortress, sending spumes of white water flying up the stone like claws trying to drag it down. "Seven save us," one of the northern men muttered. "Who'd live there? Save a madman or a saint? Or a Baratheon," Davos said, "which is something of both." By the time they reached the sheltered cove where ships could safely anchor, the sky had darkened to a blue so deep it was almost black. A light rain began to fall, thin at first, then steadier, misting the decks and slicking the planks. Lightning flickered along the horizon, silent for now, waiting for its thunder. Torches burned along the dock that jutted out from the base of the cliff, their flames bending in the wind. Figures moved there, soldiers in mail and leather, some with the crowned stag on their surcoats, others with no heraldry at all. There were fewer than Davos might have wished, but enough to show the garrison had not been completely stripped to feed Stannis' campaigns. As the cog bumped gently against the dock, ropes were thrown and caught, lines secured. Gangplanks were lowered, creaking. Robb was the first to step down, gray wind at his side, the direwolf's paws leaving wet prints on the wood. A man in a plain surcoat stepped forward to meet them, helm under his arm. His face was weathered, his hair thinning, his eyes shrewd. "Lord Stark," he said, inclining his head, "I am Ser Roland Storm, Castellan of Storm's End. By order of King Stannis, you and your companions are granted guest right within these walls. Bread and salt await you in the Great Hall." "Ser Roland," Robb said, returning the nod, "I thank you for your king's hospitality." Ser Roland's gaze flicked once, quickly, to Grey Wind. "We've little experience with wolves that size in the Stormlands," he said. "I'll trust he understands guest right as well as his master." "He understands what I tell him," Robb said, "and he bites only those I do not intend to treat as guests." The faintest trace of a smile tugged at the corners of the Castellan's mouth. "Then let us keep his teeth pointed seaward at least until the morrow," he said. "The king comes on the tide." He rode ahead on a galley. "The seas slowed you more than him, it seems." Davos felt something in his chest a knot. Good. Stannis had not decided at the last to turn aside, to make some other move. He would come here, to this wind-scoured fortress, to meet a boy from the snow and carve the shape of his realm in words as well as steel. Inside Storm's End, the air was different from Dragonstone's sulphurous tang or Riverrun's river damp. It smelled of old stone, salt, and the faint ghost of smoke that never quite left a hall where so many long winters had been weathered by the fire. The great hall was long and somewhat bare. The tapestries on its walls were faded by years of smoke and sun, their scenes of ancient battles and hunts blurred. The high table stood beneath a large, many-paned window that looked out onto nothing but gray sky and wave-tossed sea. Bread and salt were brought. Simple loaves, coarse but fresh, and a shallow dish heaped with pale crystals. Robb broke the bread himself, dipped it, and ate, his gaze steady. Then he offered it to the Greatjon, to Brynden, to each of his men in turn. Storm's End watched them with the stillness of a beast at rest, muscles coiled. Rain hammered at the windows, a constant drum. Somewhere beyond, in the dark, oars bit into water, bringing another king to the same table. The doors of the great hall banged open on a gust of wind that set the torches guttering and sent a spray of rain across the flagstones. Men turned as one, hands instinctively going to hilts, then stilling as they saw who stepped through. Stannis Baratheon walked with the unhurried stride of a man accustomed to command even when his boots were full of rainwater. His dark hair was thinning at the temples now, his face more lined than in the days when Robert had laughed and clapped him on the back in that same hall. But there was a core of iron in him that had not rusted. He wore a plain, dark surcoat with the crowned stag picked out in gold thread on his chest. No jewels, no showy furs. The only concession to flourish was the red glow at his side. Melisandre moved just behind him, as if she were his shadow. The red silk of her gown seemed to catch and hold the torchlight unnaturally, as did the ruby at her throat. Her hair, loose about her shoulders, shone dark as spilled wine. Her eyes surveyed the hall with languid curiosity, taking in every banner, every face, as if weighing them. Robb rose to meet them. He had set his crown aside. It rested now on the table before him, a silent third party to the parley. His cloak was thrown back, his sword at his hip. Grey Wind got to his feet as well, hackles prickling, a low growl rumbling in his chest like distant thunder. "Your Grace," Robb said, "welcome to Storm's End? Or welcome back, I suppose I should say." Stannis stopped a few paces from him. For a moment, the only sounds were the crackle of fire and the steady patter of rain against glass. "Robb Stark," Stannis said. "I knew your father, so I've been told," Robb replied. "He spoke of you sometimes. He said you were a man who did his duty, even when others would not." Stannis's mouth twitched. Whether at the praise or at the implication that others had failed, it was hard to say. "Ned Stark was a man of honor," he said. "Too much of it, in the end. It killed him." Robb's jaw tightened. "It was Lannister treachery that killed him," he said. "Honor was what they feared in him." "Honor is a fine thing," Stannis said, "but it's useless without power to back it." His gaze dropped briefly to the crown on the table. "You've been seeking both, and you, your Grace, already have one and claim more of the other every day," Robb answered. "Perhaps between us, we can find enough of both to make the Lannisters choke." Melisandre's eyes flicked to him, then to Grey Wind. "The wolf has teeth," she murmured, "and shadows clinging to his fur." "Leave talk of shadows," Stannis said curtly. "We are here to speak of oaths, not omens." He gestured to the table. "Sit. We'll not have this be some mummer's play where kings shout across a hall like fishwives in a market." Robb resumed his seat, though he did not lean back. Stannis took the chair opposite him. Melisandre stood at his shoulder, hands resting lightly on the back of his chair as if it were a familiar altar. Davos positioned himself slightly behind and to the side, where he could see both faces clearly. Bread and salt were set before Stannis as well, and he partook without comment. Guest right acknowledged guest right. Only then did he speak. "You wrote that you would bend the knee," Stannis said without preamble. "You have come. Let us see if your words and your spine match." Robb's fingers tightened for an instant on the edge of the table, then relaxed. He rose again, slowly, deliberately, and stepped around the table until he stood before Stannis. In the flickering light, his shadow and the king's merged for a heartbeat on the stone. "I, Robb of House Stark," he said, his voice carrying clear and strong, "by the will of my lords king in the north and the Trident, do here acknowledge Stannis of House Baratheon as rightful king of the Undulls, the Rhoynar, and the First Men, and lord of the Seven Kingdoms." Murmurs stirred among the northern men, some uneasy, some grudgingly approving. Stannis's face remained impassive, but Davos saw a subtle softening around his eyes. I will bring my swords against your enemies, Robb continued. I will answer your call when you go to war against those who would take your throne. I will not raise my hand against you or yours, so long as you keep faith with me and mine. He went to one knee then. The hall seemed to draw in around the motion, as if the very stones were watching. I do not set aside the crown my lords placed on my brow, he said. But I swear by the old gods and the new, to hold the North and the Trident as your man in name, and as my people's king in truth, if you will have it so. The words hung there, bold and carefully crafted. A bridge of sound over a chasm. Stannis studied him for a long moment. The hall held its breath. Gray Wind's growl dwindled to a low, anxious whine. At last, Stannis stood. You cling to that word, king, like a child to a toy he's been told to share, he said. But the realm doesn't care what you call yourself, Stark. It cares whether there is peace and law. Ned Stark's son kneels to me. That is what matters. He reached out and laid his hand briefly on Robb's bowed head. It was not a gentle touch, but it was not cruel. Rise, Lord Stark, he said. Warden of the North, Lord Protector of the Trident, and my sworn bannerman. Keep your crown if it pleases you and your lords. So long as you remember there is only one Iron Throne. Robb rose. His eyes met Stannis's, something like wary respect passing between them. Then let us speak, he said, of how we mean to take it back. The war map at Storm's End was smaller than the one at Riverrun, but the lines inked upon it were no less fraught with consequence. It showed the eastern half of Westeros in detail, from the neck down to Dorne, from the western edge of the Riverlands to the narrow sea. Tiny carved figures stood upon it. Lions at Harrenhal and King's Landing, stags at Dragonstone, wolves clustered around the Trident. Stannis's hand moved with efficient precision as he spoke, pushing a lion token from Harrenhal toward the Blackwater. Tywin Lannister sits here now, he said. He will not move lightly. He knows we mean to take the city, and he will keep enough men close at hand to ride to its relief if need be. If we attack with only my strength, he may gamble on the walls holding long enough for his banners to appear on our flank. Robb studied the map, his brow furrowed. He knows the North is in the field as well, he said. He knows we have broken Jaime once and struck at his raiders more than once. If he moves too far from his seat, he risks leaving the Westerlands exposed. Tywin Lannister does not think in terms of home, Stannis said. He thinks in terms of power. He'll burn his own fields if it starves an enemy. He already has, Brynden Tully put in. We've seen his work all across the Riverlands. Then we give him a choice he cannot stomach either way, Robb said slowly. Press King's Landing hard enough that he must come, or lose the city. At the same time, we send a smaller force west, not large enough to engage his main host, but enough to raid his lands, hit his supply lines. If he stays, his people burn. If he rides, his city falls. Stannis made a low, thoughtful sound. Robert would have liked you, he said grudgingly. He always favored a hammer blow that forced the other man to choose between two bad ends. I'm not my uncle, Robb said. I've seen what his choices left behind. Melisandre's fingers trailed along the edge of the map, not touching any of the pieces. The fire shows lions caught between two walls, she said. One of iron, one of snow. They claw at the bars until their paws are bloody, but the bars do not break. In the end, they drown in their own blood. That seems well enough, the great Jon said, grinning. So long as some of that blood is on my sword. Stannis ignored him. We will need timing, he said. My fleet will carry my men up the Blackwater. With your ships augmenting them, we can land more men than Joffrey's whoresons expect. Your host comes overland, from the Trident. Yes, Robb said. We can move along the eastern bank, keeping to cover as much as the land allows. If Edmure Tully holds the Lannisters' attention along the central rivers, Tywin will not know where to fortify until it's too late. And what of the Freys? Davos asked. Your mother spoke of them as if they were a danger as well as an asset. They are, Robb said. Walder Frey is loyal to Walder Frey. No more, no less. He will keep the crossing so long as he thinks we remain his best hope for reward. If he scents lion gold, he may start seeing merit in a change of allegiance. Then make sure he sees only fire in that direction, Stannis said flatly. If he betrays you, I will strip him of his towers and his name both. Robb's mouth tightened. He is my bannerman, he said. I will deal with him if he turns. Stannis's gaze flicked to him, and for a heartbeat sparks clashed between them. Two hard men, two different understandings of where a king's prerogative ended and another's began. You speak as if the war is already won, Melisandre said softly. Yet the flames show more than lions burning. They show white shadows marching in the far north. They show dead men with blue eyes that shine like ice. They show a wall of stone and old magic, and a darkness pressing at it. Robb's head came up sharply. The wall, he said. You've seen what exactly? Cold, Melisandre said, and a great hunger. Your brother stands in it in some visions. A boy with a sword and a wolf's eyes, though not this wolf. Her gaze flicked briefly to Grey Wind, asleep at the hall's edge. He is a thread in the tapestry as well. Jon, Robb murmured. The name was a sudden ache in his chest. He had pushed thoughts of his half-brother aside in the press of Southern War. Now they came flooding back. Snow in the yard at Winterfell, shared glances over tables, silent understandings. The wall will hold, Stannis said brusquely. It always has. Walls always hold, Melisandre said, until they do not. Davos shifted uncomfortably. Talk of white shadows and dead men made his skin crawl. He preferred enemies he could weigh by the number of ships they commanded, the reach of their spears. One war at a time, Robb said, though there was unease behind the practical words. If we do not deal with the Lannisters and the boy on the Iron Throne, we'll be fighting our own kind while, whatever that is, creeps closer. Then we had better win quickly, Stannis said. The storm rolled in after the councils were done for the day, as if the sky itself had decided to lend its voice to the arguments of men. Rain lashed the walls in fat, stinging drops. Thunder cracked so close it rattled the teeth in a man's head. Wind howled through the crenellations like some mad thing. Davos found Melisandre on the parapets, where she seemed least troubled by the elements. Her red gown clung to her in the wet, but she did not shiver. The ruby at her throat burned steadily, its light unaffected by the flicker of lightning. You'll catch your death, he said, raising his voice over the wind as he approached. If such a thing can touch you. She did not turn. Death is not so simple as men think, she said. You should know that by now, Onion Knight. You have seen shadows take life and men fall where they never saw a blade touch them. He grimaced. Aye. And I've seen men drown because they chose to sail in a storm when they could have stayed in port. Some dangers you can't do much about. Others you'd be a fool to walk into. She glanced at him then, a hint of amusement in her eyes. You think I walk into danger, she said, as if it were not danger that walks into me. Lightning forked across the sky, turning the sea white for a heartbeat. Davos shielded his eyes instinctively. When the afterimage cleared, he saw her watching him with that unnerving calm. You don't like what we saw today, she said. It was not a question. I don't much like anything about this war, he said. But no, I don't like that you see the North as a place of shadows and hunger. I don't like that you speak of the boy's brother and dead men in the same breath. The flames do not show me what I want, she said. They show me what is, or pieces of it. Threads. I see wolves and stags and lions, yes, but I also see a darkness that does not care about their games. She turned back to the sea. Your king thinks in straight lines, she went on. Claim, throne, law. He sees the Lannisters as an obstacle in a corridor. Move them and he walks through. The wolf boy thinks in circles and paths, like water around rock. He sees his family, his lands, the people in the fields. He will bend if it saves them. That makes him both useful and dangerous. Useful to who? Davos asked. To Stannis. To the Lord of Light, she said simply. He is a sword in the making. Whether he burns bright in our hand or turns in it depends on which way the fire blows. Davos snorted. You talk of men like they're logs for your brazier, he said. I've seen what happens to wood in the fire. I'd rather not see it happen to kings. You have already seen it happen to brothers, she said, and there was a sudden, startling gentleness in her tone. You think it was my doing that killed Renly Baratheon? It was not. I called the shadow, yes, but it was Stannis' will that shaped it. His need, his choice. When he chose the throne over his brother, the deed was done whether I drew the shadow forth or not. Davos's hands clenched on the wet stone of the parapet. Rain ran down his face. He could not say if some of the wetness were tears. You think you comfort me with that? He asked. Telling me my king carries his brother's death in him, instead of in your magic? I do not comfort, she said. I reveal. It is for you to decide what to do with what you know. He shook his head. What I know is that the more men rely on shadows and prophecies, the fewer of them come home with their skin on. I know we have flesh and blood enemies enough without adding ghosts. He paused. And I know that if we drive the boy Stark away with talk of gods and flames, we'll lose the best chance we have of taking King's Landing without drowning in wildfire. That at least seemed to catch her interest. You fear losing him, she said. You have grown fond of the wolf. I've grown fond of the idea of fewer burned villages, he said. Call it what you like. She studied him for a long moment, then nodded once, as if to herself. Very well, she said. I will not speak to him of what I see beyond the wall, unless he asks. I will not speak to him of shadows or of his brother's threads. Not yet. Let him focus on the lions. The rest will come when it must. That's more mercy than I expected from you, Davos said. It is not mercy, she replied. It is strategy. Your kind calls it politics. She smiled faintly. You see, Onion Knight, even I can think beyond fire. Thunder boomed again, closer this time. The wind shifted, carrying with it the smell of approaching dawn behind the clouds. Go below, she said. Sleep if you can. Tomorrow your king and the wolf begin carving the shape of their war. You will need your wits when the carving begins to cut deeper than either expects. He hesitated a moment longer, then turned away. As he descended the slick stone steps, he felt the storm's roar gradually muffled by stone. Above, Melisandre remained at the parapet, alone, bright coal in the heart of wind and rain, watching a sea that held more secrets than any flames. Morning came as a gray easing of darkness rather than any dramatic sunrise. The storm had spent most of its fury in the night, leaving the air washed clean and cold. Puddles lay in the courtyard, reflecting the sky in shattered fragments. The stones were slick, but the men who filled the space moved with practiced care. Stannis had chosen to make a show of their new bond. Not a gaudy spectacle. He had no taste for pageantry, but something that would sink into the minds of both sets of men like dye into cloth. The courtyard of Storm's End had been cleared of extraneous clutter. 2 flagpoles stood side by side, ropes ready, banners furled at their bases. Robb stood to the left, Stannis to the right. Their cloaks brushed, though neither moved away. Gray wind sat between Robb and the line of northern men, big head high, ears pricked. The Great John was directly behind his king, looming like a living tower. Brynden Tully stood to one side, hand resting on his sword hilt. On the opposite half of the courtyard, storm lords in Baratheon colors watched, some with open curiosity, others with wary calculation. Knights who had fought at Storm's End siege, guarding starving walls. Younger men who had sworn to Renly and now found themselves under his brother's stern gaze. Davos and Melisandre watched from a balcony above, the vantage giving them a clear view of the assembled ranks. The Red Woman's eyes were half-lidded, as if she were seeing more than what lay before her. A horn blew once, short and sharp. The murmur of men stilled. Today, Stannis said, his voice carrying easily in the morning air. A wrong that has stood since the death of King Robert is set a little nearer to right. The North and the Stormlands once fought side by side to bring down a tyrant. Today they stand together again to unseat usurpers and traitors. His gaze swept his own men. Some of you will say, "Why should we trust these wolves? They raised their own king and turned their backs on the Iron Throne." You would not be wrong to ask. But hear me. They did so because the boy on the throne murdered their lord under false pretenses and butchered their kin. He nodded once toward Robb. They have bent the knee to me not as cowards, but as men who choose the realm above their pride. I say to you now, if you trust my judgment in law, you will trust it here. Robb Stark is my bannerman. His enemies are my enemies. His men are my allies. You will treat them as such. He turned his head, just enough that Robb could see the profile of his face. You have words of your own? Robb stepped forward. He did not shout. He spoke in the tone he used when talking to his own men before a march. Steady, level, with the confidence of someone who knew how far sound could carry without strain. "My lords," he said, "you do not know me. You know my father's name. Some of you fought beside him when the dragons fell. Some of you have heard songs or tales. I am not him. I am only his son, trying as best I can not to shame his ghost." That earned a few small, surprised snorts, even from the Storm Lords. "I did not seek a crown," he went on. "My lords raised me up because the boy in King's Landing sent a headsman to take my father's life, because the Lannisters burned their villages and raped their daughters, because no one else came to stand between them and the lions." He let the words sink in, then continued. "I have come here because I believe Stannis Baratheon is the rightful king, and because I believe the North and the Trident cannot stand alone against the wealth and cruelty of the West. I will keep faith with him so long as he keeps faith with me. My men will fight beside yours, bleed beside yours, die beside yours if need be. All I ask is that when the time comes, you judge us by the enemies we kill, not the gods we pray to." The Great John thumped the butt of his spear against the stone. A few of the Storm Lords did the same, almost despite themselves. The sound spread, a low, rough beat. "Raise them," Stannis said. Two men moved to the flagpoles. Ropes creaked. The banners rose, unfurling as they climbed. First the crowned stag on its field of gold, then the gray direwolf running on snow-white cloth. The wind caught them at the top and sent them snapping out side by side. For a moment, the sun slipped between clouds and struck the cloth just so. The colors flared, bright and defiant. In that breath, the sight was more than cloth and thread. It was an idea given shape, that of old houses and hard men choosing, however uneasily, to stand in the same wind rather than be blown apart separately. Davos let himself feel a flicker of something he had not dared give much heed of late. Hope. It was a small flame, guttering in the storm of his doubts. But it was there. Beside him, Melisandre watched with a faint, distant smile. "The wolf and the stag," she murmured. "Their banners fly together now. The flames like that. For a time." "For a time," Davos echoed. Far away, beyond the sight of any man in Storm's End, in a tower at Casterly Rock, Tywin Lannister received word that Stannis and the young wolf had joined hands. His quill paused over his ledger. Gold and grain and men's lives were tallied on one side of the page. On the other, contingencies. "Send for Lord Frey," he said, "and north of them all, beyond the last holdfasts and the snows that never fully melted." Something cold and patient listened to the distant shuffle of kings and banners and plans, and did not care.